Okay, well, welcome back to week two. Like Tori said, we're going to be talking about chapters three, four, and five of the Spoonin' a Bear book. For those that may not have been here last week, I'm Daryl Radijak. I'm the author of the book, but most of you know, especially if you bought the book and you read it, there are a ton of stories about bears from the Appalachian Bear Rescue. I was one of the first employees at the Bear Rescue, which used to be called Appalachian Bear Center. So if you hear me talking about that, it's the same place. I was there from 1997 till 2000. And so a lot of the stories are from the early days of the rescue. So that's enough about me. I'm gonna dive into today's discussion about chapters three, four, and five. And just like Tori said, this is a conversation. I wish I was there in person, sitting around a big circle or a campfire talking about this. But the fact that we can do these talks virtually from all over the country, I think that's pretty darn cool too. So I'm sitting here in Utah in case you didn't know. But I am gonna you can see my slide, correct, Tori?
Yep, yep.
Okay. Okay, that's my title slide. So if you've read the book, chapter three is titled Nose, the Glorious Nose. And most of my book is made up of real life adventures with me caring for these cubs. But I interject a couple of chapters here and there to do, they're just learning chapters, learning about how bears work. And this chapter three, the nose, the glorious nose, the reason I dedicated a small chapter, they're not long chapters, but I tried to explain how incredibly wonderful, how incredibly powerful a bear's nose is, because it is literally what makes a bear a bear. And that chapter, The Nose, the Glorious Nose, it tries to explain how amazing their sense of smell is. And so I kind of developed some slides to explain the chapter. And one of the things when you hear statistics about bears having the best sense of smell in the mammal kingdom, it sounds really good. And when you hear phrases like they smell X amount of times or 2,000 times better than a human being, it sounds impressive. But if you're anything like me, like you don't really know what does 10 times better mean? What does 200 times better? What does 2,000 times better mean? And so I developed a way to explain to people. It's a simple analogy, but the best way to describe it, I created something called smell the beans. And we as humans, we know how we can smell. So we're going to take a regular can of beans, and we're going to take the average human being. So if you have a can of beans, you buy a can of beans from the store, whatever your favorite kind of beans are, you buy that can of beans, you come home, you open up the can, you pour it out, and you begin cooking those beans on the stove. Before too long, you're going to smell the beans. You can smell the beans. That is your human sense of smell. It kind of takes a little while for that aroma to really reach your nose and those sensations to really register that you're smelling beans. Now, if you take a common animal like a dog, just a good old dog that we all know and love, you'll hear people say dogs have a sense of smell that's 100 times better than ours. To put it in perspective with this analogy, that dog could be outside running in the yard and it will smell those beans that you have cooking on the stove. That's how strong their sense of smell is. They can detect smells that we couldn't even think of detecting as a human. Now, if most of you know anything about dogs, you'll know that the dog with the greatest sense of smell is, of course, see, this is why I wish we were together because you could call it out. But the dog with the greatest sense of smell is a bloodhound. And so if you take a bloodhound and you show them that can of beans, there's a really good chance it's going to be able to detect the beans. Maybe there is some bean juice spilled on the paper wrapper at the factory or something, but the bloodhound is going to be able to detect that smell before you even open the can. It's pretty crazy. A bloodhound has a sense of smell 300 times better than a human. So it's like 3 times better than the average dog. That's how good a bloodhound is. But then this is where it gets pretty nutso. You take a bear, and any bear in North America, it doesn't matter if it's a grizzly bear or a black bear. You take a bear in North America, that bear can smell the perfume that was on the lady that put the beans in the can 2 weeks earlier. That is how strong the bear's sense of smell is. And so right away when you're thinking about that, you have to like how can their sense of smell be so crazy incredible? And so it comes back, and I hate turning into the nerdy biologist, but it comes back to the whole biology of bears. You look at a bear's skull, and it looks like the average mammal skull until you look at it front ways. And if you look at that bear's skull, you see this giant opening on their face. And if you look in that giant opening, you see all this cavernous area in that nasal cavity. And what that is, that giant nasal cavity of a bear is lined with, they're called olfactory receptors. They're smell receptors. And there's millions upon millions of these smell receptors inside that bear's nasal cavity. And so when you hear scientists talk about this animal can smell twice as good or 10 times or 300 times better, that's typically based on the amount of smell receptors. So they can compare one animal to another and gauge that based on the number of smell receptors. Because that bear has so many, let's go back to our discussion before. We all know what that human sense of smell is because that's what we can smell. That's the baseline. And like I said, when you look at the dog, now we'll look at the bloodhound. The bloodhound has 300 times more smell receptors than a human. So we can assume they have a sense of smell 300 times better than ours. Would you believe the bear has 7 times more smell receptors than a bloodhound? So if you do that computation, you're going to come out to over 2,000 times more smell receptors than a human. So that's just so you know, that's where they come up with a bear can smell 2,000 times better or 100, whatever the calculation is. It's based in science, it's based on the number of olfactory receptors. And so when you see, wow, they got a sense of smell 2,000 times better than us. Right away, if you're anything like me, it's like I can't even imagine that because if you can smell so good, you got to have sensory overload. Like you can smell anything out there. So wouldn't your brain kind of explode from all this stimuli coming in if you could smell anything? And so the best way to explain it, and again, this is my explanation, but hopefully it clicks to you. I don't know how many people out there, have you ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese? I know they're popular in the South, especially if, if you had kids. And you go to a Chuck E. Cheese, you know how loud they are. It's just bells and whistles and everything going off. For some of the older crowd in here, if you go to an like when you were kids and you went to an arcade, there's all this stimuli going off with bells and sirens and loud noises. For the older crowd, if you like casinos, casinos are pretty loud. But the best way probably to describe it, you ever go to a jam-packed restaurant or a bar or anything like that? People are talking all over the place. There is so much noise distraction. And you can hear all the stimuli, it's all fuzzy. But as soon as someone says, Daryl, table for five, you hear that. And the reason you hear that is because your brain can filter out the noise and it will focus on what you need to focus on, what is most important to you and your body. So when they call out your name in a really loud, busy place, your ears pick it up. You hear everything else, but you're not paying attention to it, but you can focus on what you need to hear. So that is how I equate the bear's sense of smell. They wake up in the morning, they're usually really hungry, so they're going to say, "Oh, what can I go find to eat?" And they're going to put their nose to the air and they're going to smell. And I guarantee they're going to smell that honey that's up in the beehive in the big oak tree. I promise you, they're also going to smell some of those blackberries that are ripening down in the berry field. They're also going to smell some of those really tasty little grubs that are underneath that rotten log along the creek. But then they're going to catch whiff of something else. They're going to smell something that's really, I say bad for them, but it's good for them because it's really high in fat. It will fatten them up really quickly. And that's human food. And human food, as you know, it's bad for bears to get. It's good for their bodies because it will fatten them up, but it's bad from a behavioral standpoint. And so when a bear is out there, especially I know a lot of you folks are joining in from the East Tennessee area, you know that bears can smell human foods in most places, especially in the East Coast, because there's so many people in the East. And so this is why food storage, trash and garbage storage is so important because you don't want that bear saying, "Hey, I'm going to get some food from this human being over there." So that's why it's so important. But a bear's nose literally drives that animal. So when you look at bear behavior, they are almost always driven by food. So in the springtime, when they emerge from the den, that picture on the left, there's not many things nutritious for them. There's like fresh green leaves from grasses and new trees, but it's kind of like eating an iceberg lettuce salad. You can eat a ton of it. It's not going to pack on a ton of pounds. But then you move to the summertime when some of the berry crops ripen or the cherry trees, and the bears will switch their diet to what we call soft mast, which is the berry crop. And then hopefully the good wild bears will switch their diet again in the fall to what we call the hard mast crop, which is the nut crop. They love acorns. This is actually, I believe, either a walnut or a hickory. It's a walnut, I think. But the bears love acorns. And so the bear's nose drives them because they hibernate. They're starving when they awake from their hibernation in the springtime. Lots of berries available for them in the summer. And then in the fall, when they're getting ready to prepare for their hibernation, they go through this phase, nerd word coming, but it's called hyperphagia. And it literally translates to, um, uh, I'm drawing a blank here, but they binge on food. And so
Excessive
they're,
hunger, maybe, or
yeah, it'll come to me as soon. Don't get old. Whatever you guys do, it's like I have a thought and
You
it just
want to know what the Latin root is of phagia? It's
feeding frenzy.
okay, yeah, yeah. Feeding, I say eating phagia, feeding, yeah. It's like
Yeah. So that and that's what we call they enter hyperphagia. So that they have this feeding frenzy, and it's all it's meant to do is fatten them up for the hibernation. And so bears, like I said, it doesn't matter spring, summer, or fall, they're looking for food, and that nose drives them to the food. So that was my chapter 3, just trying to explain how powerful and wonderful their nose is, the nose, the glorious nose. So before I dive into the actual stories of chapters 4 and 5, does anyone have any questions about their nose? Oh,
I
this is
don't.
why it's so important because their nose will drive them to human foods if it's readily available. So, anyway, does anyone have any questions about a bear's nose or sense of smell?
Not yet, but I have a couple. So if anyone is thinking of any, you can type them in or thinks of some. But the one graphic you showed, Daryl, with the skull, and then there was, I don't know, the
I'll come back to
thermal
it.
looking. I really liked that image. But two, is there any differentiation between the colors?
Um, there might be, and I forget I didn't cite where I got this, and I
That's
probably
fine. I
should.
was just
But
curious.
this was kind of like a detailed section of where all the olfactory receptors are within a bear's nasal cavity. And if I used to have a slide of the human olfactory sensors, and
Mm.
it looks there's nothing in there. And our human nose, it's nothing compared to what the bears have. So just so you know, I see Greg and Katrina joined us.
Yeah.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think that
The yellow in that is that's the brain, right? That's like the part of the brain it
Oh,
enters into.
that's a really good point. One of the things
Yeah.
that is so crazy cool with bears, it's like a direct link to the brain. And
Right.
so where we have to process things with our brain, like because it's so closely tied, it has this direct pathway right to the brain. And I try to explain this. I teach bear safety classes, and I am a huge proponent of bear spray. And inevitably, I'll have people that, oh, I'll use a Colt 40. They'll use a gun before they use bear spray. But I am a big proponent of bear spray, partly because it puts out a wall of spray. It's not a single bullet that you hope hits the target. So it creates a wall between you and the bear. But because of the bear's design, you know what it feels. Well, you might not know, but when you get blasted with pepper spray, it is awful. And I did it a couple of times when I was working at the Bear Center. Um, and it is nothing. It makes you want to cry. It will just stop you in your tracks. And our sense of smell is nothing compared to a bear. So when a bear hits that, it shorts out their brain. Like they forget what they're doing. Like if they were planning on attacking or doing something with you, that's the last thing on their mind because their brain is suddenly hit with this capsicum, this peppery stuff that will just like short circuit whatever they're doing. And that's why it is extremely effective. Now, you will hear stories once in a while of a bear not reacting to it, but they've done studies between which is safer to use, bear spray or a firearm. And the bear spray is usually much more effective at stopping the bear and it causes less injury. The bear will live. Sometimes people will not only shoot the bear with a gun, but they shoot their other people. And so
Yeah.
spray is just a much better option when you're in bear country.
Yeah, and there I was gonna say when I worked in Yellowstone for one season, I had a woman fall on her bear spray can on her hip while hiking. It exploded
Yeah,
right on her face. She had it in like a chest rig, so she fell. This rock was perfectly positioned. A pointy rock ruptured her canister 8 miles deep in the backcountry, and we got to her. It'd been an hour since it had happened, and she was so incapacitated,
yeah,
couldn't see still, flushing her eyes. And so, a bear, if it gets the dose of the bear spray right into the face, and I think that's where people, underestimate it and they say it doesn't work. It does got to get them in the face, and it's got to be close. You got to be, you can't be 50 yards away and put a cloud of bear spray up and think that it's gonna,
right.
smell it up in there. So, but when you hit a bear in the face with that, just like a human, yeah, they're completely incapacitated, and their brain literally will not work. And I've heard that bloodhounds have a similar innervation to their brain like bears do, and that's what makes them partially so much better than other
Yep.
dogs. I worked with a dog handler a little bit on a search before, and she was explaining how the bloodhound is the only breed that really has that like
Direct link.
innervation like that to the brain. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So they think,
awesome. And there was actually you brought up the hiker getting sprayed. There was actually an instance. One of the things we teach in bear safety when you're carrying bear spray, you got to carry it accessible in a holster on your belt or somewhere where you can grab it. So many people will buy bear spray and put it in the bottom of their backpack. Does no use there. But the crazy thing, there was a situation within the last couple of years where someone had their bear spray on their backpack. It was like strapped to their backpack, and they got into a tussle with a bear, and it just so happened the bear bit the canister and got a dose of it, and
oh
that
wow,
literally saved them. But
yeah,
they kept the can. There's a tooth mark or a tooth puncture in the can, and so that they were talking about it on the Meat Eater podcast. So
yeah. Well, yeah,
anyway,
that yeah. We got one question there on the chat. Mary says, "Do all bears have the same sense of smell?" I know you said North America, but I think some of those the short-faced bears and sloth bears are a little different, right? If we were to go
yeah,
internet,
I'm more of an expert like you with the North American bears. I wish I knew about the Asiatic and
yeah,
sloth and sun bear. I just don't study those. But the bears in North America, there has been so many analogies, like with a polar bear smelling a whale carcass from 20 miles away,
right.
and just different anecdotal information like that, which is it just shows that their sense of smell is just unreal.
Yeah, I think Mary, the Asiatic bears and the South American Andean bear, you might find some different stuff out there, but I'm sure all bears have better sense of smell than us, no matter which one you go to.
Just a note too, bear spray does expire. So just a couple things, like if anyone's going, either out west or wherever there's bears, it does a couple things to look for is it does expire. You cannot fly with it, so you can't take it. But a lot of places like Alaska, Yellowstone, Tetons probably have like rental stations that
They
you can
do.
rent while you're there on vacation and then turn it back in, which is actually a really good deal because again, you can't fly with it. So
They're
there's all these
expensive.
cans.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
you're talking 40, $50 per can. That was one of the other things I was getting together today, Tori, and I was checking the expiration dates because I've got like 4 or 5 cans I'm taking with me for my folks. So
nice. Yeah, I wonder, you mentioned the last statistic I saw, and it's rough, so don't quote me on it, but it's like guns versus bear spray is like 98.9% effective
it's up
if
there in
used
the mid
correctly.
90s.
Yeah, if used correctly. And then I don't remember what the gun one was, but
And
it was much higher.
yeah, and the caveat with that is that is data from known encounters that get
Hmm.
recorded. There's probably lots of other counters that the bear spray worked effectively and it was just never recorded. So I always preach on bear spray is probably your brain is number one most effective safety device. So just know how to use your brain. But if you don't know how to use that, take bear spray. Okay, so that was my nerdy point of the book. I will have a couple other chapters where I just go off on a biological tangent, but this will take us to the next chapter, chapter 4, where I talk about Dakota and Sarah. I don't know what I titled the chapter, but what I wanted to jump in before we dive in there, we're talking about a couple of bears that I took care of. These were actually the very, very first bears that I ever cared for when I was at the center. They were non-releasable. Um, but the thing that was so cool is they were cinnamon colored black bears. And so the cool thing when you look at black bears, you hear the term black bear. That is actually the species name. That has nothing to do with the color they are. Some of them are black, and most of the bears you see will be kind of looking like that bear in the center. Most of the bears in the East Coast are black. You could get some really black bears. But what's so cool is the further west you go, their colors start changing because in some parts of the West, it is very hot, very dry. And black, what's the last color you want to be wearing in the hot desert sun is a uh, black fur coat. So when you move westward, you start getting into these other color phases of black bears. And so there are some brownish looking black bears. There's some blonde looking black bears. I've seen a few blonde black bears in New Mexico. There are cinnamon colored black bears, which are that reddish color. And then, believe it or not, these are my two favorites. There's actually a bluish color. They call them glacial bears. This bluish gray coloration is found in southeast Alaska along the coast. And then there's another pocket along the coast up in Canada called Kermode bear or spirit bears. They are white. These are not albinos at all. They are just white colored black bears. And so black bears, I don't I've heard it a couple of times and I truly believe it that they have the greatest color variation of all the mammals, but they're gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Look at all those colorations in them. So don't get fooled by, oh, black bears are black because some of them are, but there's a lot in the West that are not. So, with that, I'm going to talk about Dakota and Sarah. Dakota and Sarah were the very first two bears I received. I received a call from Walter Cook, who was with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. And he said, Daryl, I got a favor to ask of you. I know you're a rehab center, but we have confiscated a couple of bears and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is looking for a place to hold the bears while this court case is settled. And so they were confiscated. Someone had them as pets. I believe they had them in North Carolina for a while. I don't know exactly what agency confiscated them, but they asked if we can hold them for the Fish and Wildlife Service while all the details of this legal case were sorted out. So they sent a couple bears to us. We didn't know their exact age. We were guessing they were maybe 3 or 4 years old. They're definitely adults, but they weren't like super old adults. This one here is Dakota. He was shedding quite a bit. And this one here is Sarah. And so this was a great opportunity for the Bear Center because we were open for business, but we didn't really know how to do business. So we constructed these bear pens, and we had some really smart people like Kim Delozier working on the design, but they really weren't tested by bears, especially any bears of size. And so, for those of you that don't know, the bear pens that we usually put the bears in once they're healthy enough um, to be put in the bear pens, to like as long as they're not needing confinement or special medications, we put them in these large enclosures. They're half acre in size. You can see all the vegetation. It's a really natural environment for them. And it's just a safe place for them to be for weeks or months or however long it takes for those bears to be rehabbed, to get healthy again. In this particular situation, Dakota and Sarah, they were already healthy. We just needed to hold on to them. And so we're like, this is a great opportunity for the Bear Center to learn how well well the bear pens work. Now these bear pens is chain link fence going up, but if you see, let me see in this. No, if you see in this picture, there's regular chain link fence, but what a bear can climb a chain link fence like it's not even there. But what keeps the bears in, you see these yellow things? There's an electric fence on the inside. So there's I think it's still three strands on the bottom. We also have
We,
electric.
we do we do seven now.
You okay?
Yeah.
So we were risking it in the beginning, but
Tom kept adding a strand, I think, every couple years until he felt good about it.
because you
So
find out what the bears can do or not.
yeah.
Now, understand that an electric fence is not. It's not really a physical deterrent because you can still climb over an electric fence and get shocked. But you can do it's not going to kill you by getting shocked. It's more of a mental deterrent because, and I've watched it with a couple of bears that were first put in. When they go up to an electric fence, they don't know what it is. And I've seen them like put their lips on it and all of a sudden they get zapped. Now it'll sting them, but it's not going to do any physical damage, like give them a heart attack or anything. But it creates this mental image like, ow, this fence hurts. And so once they develop that mental barrier, they won't even go near the chain link fence because they know not to go near that thing or else they're going to get zapped. And so we put the bears down there, these adult bears, and this was a good test to see if the facility worked. And so it was working great. We had these bears for a number of weeks while the Fish and Wildlife Service was doing what they were doing. And I learned a lot. Again, brand new, didn't really work a ton with bears. So I would go down there every day and observe them, what they were doing. And you learn a lot about bear behavior, the vocalizations, the body posturing. And one day I went down to the enclosure and the bears, you could tell something was wrong. They were pacing back and forth, they were huffing, they were popping their jaws. And if you know anything about bear behavior, when a bear's really vocal, it's their way of saying, I'm nervous. Something's making me uncomfortable. And they're trying to talk, but they don't speak English. So they're doing all these vocalizations, the popping of the jaws, they'll smack their lips back and forth, and you can hear their lips smacking. Or they'll go, that exhaling really loud is also them telling you they are nervous. Something's agitating them. And so I was looking in the pens and I'm like, something's wrong. And I didn't know, like, I saw Dakota, I saw Sarah, and I'm starting because they're pacing back and forth, they're swatting the ground. Like, what is going on? And my first thought was, I wonder if there's another bear that's around here. Well, either it's outside the fence or possibly it climbed into the pen because Sarah was getting, she was a female, she was getting of the age where she could potentially go into heat. So maybe she drew another bear in. So everything's going through my mind. What is making these bears all nervous? And the thing you have to understand, the bear center, it's designed to keep bears in, not to keep bears out. And so if she potentially drew another male from the area, that bear could easily get inside the fence. So I was scrambling, walking all around, just trying to find out what the heck was making them nervous. And some of you may have already seen it, but I snapped this picture. The big threat in their world was that thing right there. It was a eastern box turtle. And these bears, they were raised by hand. They were not bears in their mind. They were humans in their mind. And so we were finally treating them as wild bears. We put them in this enclosure and they didn't know how to act. They didn't know what it was like to be a bear, which was pretty sad. And so this little eastern box turtle got into the enclosure. I don't know how. Well, it was probably already in there and it was freaking them out. And so they were vocalizing. And when I saw it, I was laughing because them not knowing how to react. Here you have almost a full-grown bear, and they would sneak on their belly and like touch the turtle and go running back to the wood as fast as they could. Like their back legs were going faster than their front legs, thinking they were just going to get the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle on them. And so it was pretty comical, but it was also really, really sad to see bears not knowing how to be bears. And so, fortunately, these bears, the legal aspect got all figured out after a number of weeks. The Fish and Wildlife Service came back, picked them up again, and they went to a sanctuary. A sanctuary out what that was part of the court case because they were cinnamon bears. They could pretty much prove that they weren't from this area, and so whoever whoever was in trouble for holding these bears got tried for Lacey Act violations, and that's a federal crime for transporting animals across state lines. And so, anyway, it was a sad situation, but it's a really good thing for the Bear Center to learn more about the center itself, whether or not it could handle bears. But pretty awesome learning experience from my standpoint. So, any questions or comments about Dakota and Sarah?
Daryl, I was going to ask you, did they do much climbing when they were did
No,
they climb?
no, hardly any at all.
You
Like
think they were raised indoors without anything to climb on or something when
I can almost
yeah,
guarantee because
yeah.
like they knew how to like they can forage for food, but you know as well as I, like you put a wild bear in the enclosure, and next thing you hear their claws and they're going up a tree.
Yeah, going up a tree. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was surprised and I was wondering, did they even really try the fence very much or they were so used to being captives that they didn't really test the
I
fence
don't
much more than probably
recall I don't recall seeing them get shocked by the fence, but there was we had another adult. We violated we had a couple of adult bears when I was there,
yeah. Yeah, so you
but
guys broke a lot of rules back
yeah, apparently.
then.
Now you're paying for it. Um,
Yeah.
but I saw the one bear. He was anesthetized spur. He got hit by a car on the spur, and we only kept him for like a week or two. Um, but he woke up from being anesthetized, and we put him in the big enclosure. And when he woke up, I was down there watching him, and he walked over to the fence and he sat down right by the fence, and he was the one he put his lips up to the fence, and
Yeah.
that thing let out the biggest bawl. Like after he got jolted on his lips, then he went tearing back into, and I didn't see him ever approach the fence again.
Yeah.
And so,
I think electric fence works fantastically on bears because when they do hit it with their nose, it
yeah.
goes to that huge brain center that the nose is tied
Yeah.
into. And I'm like, man, when bears get shocked on that big wet schnoz and it goes, that shock goes up that olfactory passageway, it must be way worse than getting shocked anywhere else.
I can imagine. And the good thing with this is if the electricity goes out, and in the early days, our electricity went out quite, you have a tree limb come down or a tree come down, short the system out. We didn't even have like a backup generator that would automatically kick on. I would have to fire one up. But many times, like the electricity would go, and we wouldn't even know it. And the bears were pretty, at that point, if they've been in the pen for a while, they have no idea the electricity's down. They just know not to go near the fence. So,
Yeah, we don't see them test it other than when they first get out there, and really
right.
the littlest ones, it's part of our I tell people this, part of our limitation on putting bears out in the wild enclosures is, are they big enough and are they old enough to understand the fence? Because we've had some little ones, 15 pounders in mid-May
Yeah.
where they got shocked a lot of times before they figured it out. And, that's where Tom wanted to add more wires apparently over time, was they were getting trapped behind a wire. So he put more and more wires in. So I think there's 6 wires on enclosures 3 and 4, but enclosures 1 and 2 have 7 wires. And I think you can get away with less, but the gap between the wires was big enough that a bear could get behind it and then
Yeah.
get stuck in there and keep getting shocked. And after you get trapped in there, I think you're never going near it again. But it'd be
Oh,
pretty,
we had one last year that did it 3 times. She trapped herself
yeah.
three
The
times.
early that was
Hmm.
early,
Yeah.
like May. That was in May, and I just
Which
think the youngest ones couldn't figure it out as
Yeah.
quick as others.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and just
really
so
quick.
everyone knows too, like during that, when we do release them out there, we're watching the cameras to make sure that
we
each
turn
one
the
of them
fence
we
off if they
see,
get stuck.
and we turn the fence off. Yeah.
Yeah, we've had to run
Um,
out there with a catch pole to grab them to get them out from behind the wires when they did that. So it's we've got it figured out now, but I know that's been a problem Tom had in the past, and that's why he added so many wires.
Yeah, Daryl, I'm glad you shared this story because it's one of the most common questions I see is, do you ever have bears that you can't release? And I say, in the early days, we did have a couple, and this is one of those stories. And so for everyone watching, if you ever wondered that, or if anyone else asks, we definitely have in the past, but like Daryl said, these ones were obviously had
Special
a kind of a
circumstance.
different circumstance, being that they were captive since they were
Yeah.
cubs.
And there's so much sentiment out there like, oh, if you get a bear that's just send it to a zoo or a sanctuary. You can't do that. Zoos don't want bears. You'll almost never find a zoo that has room for a bear. We 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 did it a few times, and I think there are a couple of stories in the book that we'll eventually get to, but it's not easy. Oftentimes it's impossible to find a place to send a bear. So anyway, okay, that's Dakota and Sarah, and I can't see the. Well, I could see the chat if I turn it on, but
We're good right now.
okay. So that will lead us. I'm gonna get rid of my Ninja Turtle. So that takes us to chapter 5, and chapter 5 is the bear without a smile. So just to summarize that chapter, it was this was one of the earlier bears, and I remember getting a phone call about a couple of bears that someone believed they were orphaned, and they were hanging out at the Lambert Acres golf course. And obviously, the Bear Center, we don't go out and catch bears. That's what TWA or the National Park Service does. So we reported it, and the agency looked at it, and after a day or so, there was no mama bear in sight. So TWA went out there and they captured, there was 2 cubs that were up in a tree on Lambert Acres golf course. And so they captured the 2 cubs and they brought them to the bear center. One was a male, one was a female. And they said you might want to hold on to them for a little while. The male bear looks pretty good, but the female looks a little underweight. So I kept them both in a cage. I fed them both. The male bear had no problem. He was eating just fine. So into the large enclosure he went. But I was a little worried about the female bear because she didn't want to eat at all. And it's like, you're a bear. You have a big bowl full of food and she wasn't eating. So I called Dr. Ramsey, let him know what was happening. So we delivered this bear to the University of Tennessee Vet Center. And well, actually, I tell you what, Dr. Ramsey came out to the bear center, and I had her in this little cage that you see here. And so many people think cubs are so cute and cuddly. I'll give you the cute, but the cuddly part, it's not happening with a wild bear because she was about 11, 12 pounds, I think, and he wanted to get a closer look at her. And being a vet, you're used to getting scratched and bit. And I watched, he picked up this female bear by the scruff of her neck. And most people are afraid of a small dog. Understand that a small dog like has limited mobility with their limbs. Bears don't. Bears could reach wherever they want. And so Dr. Ramsey picked her up by the scruff of her neck, and she reached around and sunk her claws and just raked him. And I could see like the scratches and the blood coming out. And I'm like, holy cow, are you okay? And he's like, this happens all the time. Anyway, he was able to get the shot in her, put her back in the cage, and she soon fell asleep. And he was looking her over, and she looked relatively healthy, but then he was examining and he saw some puncture wounds on the top of her head and then on the top of her muzzle. He's like, "Oh, she must have got bit by something. She either got bit by another bear or maybe because they were at the golf course, maybe it was a dog or someone's dog attacked her." And so he's like, I'm gonna take her to well, because she was sedated, he opened up her mouth and she literally had no teeth. So he's like, she's got an infection really bad. So they think she may have been bitten, developed this infection, and she was losing all of her teeth. And he's like, this isn't good. So he took her to the vet center. They did more x-rays. Fortunately, everything checked out. And the good thing is, all those teeth that were rotting were her baby teeth. And so bears are like humans. They have those initial set of teeth, and then their adult teeth will come in. And so he sent her back to the bear center, still missing teeth, but said her new teeth are already starting to grow in, but we got to treat this infection. So he gave her some rounds of antibiotics to fight the infection, kept her in a little cage while we administered all those medications, and within a week or two, she was eating, she was doing great. And so we returned her to the big pen with her brother. They immediately joined back up. We kept them for a couple more months, just fattening them up. And then this next slide, that was actually her being released. Now, the one thing you'll notice is back then we were basing a lot of what we were doing on a research paper from it was Alt and Beecham, Gary Alt, and I forget Beecham's first name, but they were two wildlife biologists, and they studied bears up in Pennsylvania. And their study was trying to determine when a bear became self-sufficient. And what they determined is once a bear reaches, I think it's 5 months of age and at least 30 pounds, they know how to be a bear. They can survive if the resources are good, they can survive on their own. And so back then, our goal was they got to be at least 30 pounds. We were usually shooting for 40 pounds or more just to give them that added weight. But we had a couple that were just soon as they were big enough, we were getting them out the door. And Lamb was one of those younger ones or smaller ones, and that was the last we ever saw of Lamb. And she hopefully lived happily ever after. We didn't have the luxury of a lot of tracking collars back then, so we nursed them back to health and turned them loose, and we just like to believe they lived long, healthy, wild lives after that. So I won't see it in 2 weeks yet. I'm still here to talk, but that was the story of Lamb. That was chapter 5, the bear without a smile. So her new teeth came in, and I'm sure after we released her and returned her to the wild with her brother, she was smiling a whole lot after that.
Hey
So.
Daryl, the picture, this is just another question we get a lot, especially on release stuff. jumping out of the truck, people have questions about like the impact of them landing, like how hard they're landing. I'm just curious, like what you would say to that, because we get it a lot, especially if it's the traps, in the back of a truck.
Yeah, these wild animals can do amazing things. They can fall from trees and be fine. Jumping from that distance is no different than from them jumping off a boulder, jumping from like the lowest limb of a tree. Animals are just incredibly dexterous.
Mm.
But the other thing to know is wild animals have tremendous healing powers. And some of the chapters that we're going to talk about, like if an animal, say she twists her ankle, it might hurt for a little bit, but before you know it, she's going to be back to herself in no time. We've had some crazy, grievous injuries, like broken bones, that within a few weeks they're completely healed. It's just amazing the resiliency of their bodies. And so the jump from that height, I don't think even phases them one bit. They see the opening there and they just can't wait to return to the wild, so they usually hit it full bore. So,
And so, yeah, they usually can't wait to jump out.
but
Yeah,
every
we've
once
seen
in a
some
while
bears.
you'll have one that you open the door and you're like, nah, come on out. It just won't come
Yeah.
out. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some shy ones, and the jump out of the truck is nothing compared to some of the heights we've seen bears, jump 10 foot out of the tree onto the ground just
Yeah.
for fun, it seems sometimes. So, yeah, they got four legs. They can land like a cat. I will say I've seen some of the fatter bears before back when we used to release a lot of them in the park when I worked there. Some of the 100+ pounders, they would hit the dirt and they'd face plant and
Roll.
belly flop. Yeah, and roll. And it's a little bit too much weight for some of those. So, I like to keep the bears a little bit lighter than, that 100+ category. You start getting to where you got a little bit too much weight on them to be as mobile as you want to be. So, but yeah, I think Tori, people are always thinking about themselves, right? And I'm like, well, heck, if I jumped out of that truck, I know I'm 33 now. My knees might hurt a little bit,
Pennies,
but
yeah.
I'd be all
Yeah.
Right. I don't have any other questions in the chat box, Daryl. I have one that I kind of want to float to you and Greg. And I don't know if it's a dumb question, but I'm just thinking about, and Katrina might have input too, because I'm thinking about bears that are not used to people at all and not used to people's smells. So hot dogs, burgers, and we're talking, I'm going back to the nose chapter. If they're so used to smelling berries or, grubs and they're eating berries and they do smell this new smell, do you think it's curiosity that would get the best of them, or do you think they can tell that that food is better, like fattier?
I want to hear Greg's answer. I will tell
oh
you there's a lot of learned behavior with that. And as soon
Okay,
as they get that first taste
sure.
of human foods, they can get hooked really, really quick. But Greg, if you want to give it a
yeah.
shot first.
I'll tell you what I think what I'm gonna say is probably echoed from what I heard from Kim Delozier and Bill Stiver and then Ryan. So it may not be that much of my own thought, but I think that they smell those foreign smells, something that fried chicken. I don't think a bear has to have eaten fried chicken to smell fried chicken and know it could be a food source. But I don't think they smell fried chicken and their brain goes, "That's chicken," right? They don't know what it is till they've actually experienced it. But
Sure.
the curiosity, to try it, it can certainly be a driving factor upon discovering fried chicken. But I think when it comes to human food, bears also smell humans, and that's what
Mhm.
keeps a lot of these wild bears wild is they smell that human food, sure, but they smell humans, and they're like, well, you know what? I don't know what those good smells are, but I know what those bad smells are. That's humans. And yeah, I'm gonna avoid that place, that location. Maybe he moves in and investigates when the human smell is gone, and that's where I think a lot of that picnic area behavior starts. And I think Kim Delozier would say the same thing in one of his old videos is, nighttime garbage, nighttime food scraps. That's where those curious bears come in to investigate because the people are gone and then they get the taste and then they know what that smell is to be more bold to investigate. But really losing the fear of people, in my opinion, drives the boldness and lets them give into that curiosity that their nose is creating for them. So you go ahead, Daryl. You tell me what you
No,
think.
well, I was going to mention the same thing. A lot of what I know is from the brain of Kim DeLozier. He developed this spectrum of bears becoming night active all the way to day active. So night active, they're smelling those human foods, but the human scent is down a bit because people go home. And then if they go into a picnic area and they're able to find scraps, they can tolerate that human smell because there's a food reward. And just they slowly get bolder and bolder. Like, okay, I still smell humans, but I also smell that food reward. And so when that long spectrum, if a bear keeps getting rewarded and getting human foods, they begin to, I don't even care if I smell a human, I know there's a possibility of me getting food. And that's when they get bolder and bolder and bolder. And the far end of that spectrum is day active. A bear that comes into a picnic ground in the middle of the day when there's hundreds of people there, that bear is potentially a problem because it is so bold it doesn't care about the humans being there. So, um, really, really good question. You reminded me though. There's one video in one of my classes where someone was filming at nighttime. They had their lantern going in their. It was either dawn or dusk. It like barely breaking daylight or just getting dark, and they were filming from inside their tent. And there was a bear that was coming in. It was a young adult bear, but it was coming in, but it was so scared. It was like so timid. Like if there was a little bird chirper, like you could see it. It was so nervous. It didn't want to come in. It was terrified. And this person let the bear come all the way in. And the whole video, I'm like, just say boo, do. You would have sent that bear like running 80 miles an hour the other way if you would have just scared it. Um, and so yeah, it shows bears when they're first learning that if you could hit them with a negative stimulus, you could save a bear's life so easily because just like that electric fence, if they get zapped and they realize, hey, this is going to hurt me or this is a bad thing, this is scary, they're not going to want to try to test it out for a while. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, some bears get treed by cats. There, I don't know if you've ever seen a picture of a bear in a tree with a cat at the base of it. It floats around social media every now and then.
yeah,
But we've seen cubs on cameras at ABR be scared by pretty much their own shadow.
a turtle.
Some of the more the turtle. I mean, the turtle's a good example. So foreign things can be that scary to them. It's not worth the risk, even when they do smell those high caloric foods that we have. So I think a lot of the negative bear behavior is really driven by that opportunistic, found the high caloric food source, and then the learned behavior really starts. I don't think the sense of smell is the real cause of some of the bad bear behavior we see. The sense of smell is a great tool for exploring, but ultimately, if they don't find that high caloric food in that developed area, high caloric food in the middle of the woods may not be a problem, right? A bear could find a bucket of fried chicken 4 miles deep in the back country of Maine away from a road, and he's not going to go find a KFC anytime soon, right? But
Yep,
a bear finding it on your back porch, now he knows back porches are food, right? Now it's
yep,
everyone's back porch, and then so that's where the sense of smell only goes so far, in my opinion, from what I've seen.
yep. And
Yeah.
I hate to say this, Greg and Tori, but so many TikTok videos and Facebook videos is bad bear behavior, especially around the Gatlinburg
Yeah.
area.
Oh,
And
yeah.
Oh yeah, there's new ones every day. Yeah.
yeah, I just watched
It
one. It was either today or yesterday where someone was getting a bag of stuff out of the back of their pickup truck, and a adult mama
yeah.
bear with a couple of her cubs was right there at the bed of her pickup truck, and he he patted his hand, and the bear like reacted, but then he walked away and let the bear go up in the truck and get the groceries, and
Yeah.
so anyway,
Yeah, I saw the reporter actually asked me about it. I had to meet with a reporter today. They asked me if I'd seen that video. I was like, "Yep, saw it this morning." But that's a perfect
so,
example of people giving. They give up, right? They give in on the bear, and
yeah,
then you just gave this. the school bully your lunch
Or
money.
all they do is take their phone out to record.
Yeah, and then you just all you do is the phone, right? I always tell people, I'm like, bears are not afraid of your phone. Like when you
Yeah.
hold the phone up, that
Well,
it does not create an
my
experience.
the, I'm going to tell you my opinion, and I think what we need to do, state wildlife agencies need to do, because yes, securing your garbage, doing as much as you can to make sure bears can't get access to human foods is great. But no matter how great the educational program we have, there's going to be bad apples that don't care or may even want to draw on a bear. So the fact that you're always going to have a few bad apples spoiling it for bears, I think we need to flip it around. We need to be more aggressive and try to get an army of people that will scare bears away. Like if they see a bear coming, they become screaming banshees, banging pots, air horns, whatever. And if we have enough people that will do that when bears first start approaching human country, we can teach bears early on and start saving them before they get to the point where we got to do the horrible things. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And Daryl, what you said is exactly what I told a group of wedding venue people last night. I got invited to speak at the Smoky Mountain Wedding Association, and they have bears showing up these wedding venues eating people's cakes while they're set up at tables right during a ceremony. It's gotten that bad, right? And it's not that the bear smelled their cake. It's that bear comes through there every day and checks and sees what food's out there. And I told him like, hey, look, if you guys want to keep your venues safe for guests and you protect your food, these expensive wedding cakes, I said, you need to scare every bear away the moment you see it break any of the perimeter. I said, the moment you see a bear, someone needs to be on it and throwing rocks, chasing it out of there because the moment you let them get comfortable, you're just inviting them to come, try and steal something.
what I was tempted to do, because I have my wildlife education site, it's Wildlife for You. I was actually going to try to run promote because everyone sends in videos of bears crawling up in their hot tub or on their porch or whatever. I wanted to promote only videos of people scaring bears away. I totally understand if you see a bear, get your phone, get the picture that you want, get a little video, but as spend 10, 20 seconds doing that, and then film yourself scaring that bear to the next county. That's what
Yeah.
we need to promote.
I wonder
And
if
yeah.
part of it too is like, I mean, I know a lot of people I grew up with that you don't know about wild, like for someone to see a bear, if they don't know about a bear to yell at it
Right.
and they don't have that reaction of like they're trying to do it for TikTok. I think people just don't, I think they're scared. They don't know
I,
that black bears would run away from you
I
mostly.
will tell you, when I got hired at the Bear Center, I had never worked with a bear. I worked with a lot of wildlife, had all the education, but I never really worked with bears much. And I started hanging out with Kim Delosier and took his classes. And I remember the first time I was by myself and I was in Gatlinburg behind the what's the hotel that's
Park
famous?
Vista, the Park
Yeah, the
Vista.
Park
Yeah.
Vista.
Yeah.
And I went up there, I drove in my Jeep and I went in the parking lot and I turned around and there was a bear like 20 feet from me. My knees were shaking because this is my first experience of like a large adult bear. Over time, like you learn to love bear, and like you can't wait to see them. But that initial reaction from folks coming in that have no experience with bears, there's quite a bit of fear there and unknown.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it's a hard ask, but if we keep hammering home, like get your picture, but then yell, bang pots, blow an air horn, do something to make that bear uncomfortable is what we really need to start promoting.
And
Yeah.
one of the newest Bearwise flyers, Daryl, I don't know if you've seen it. They put out one called "Scare the Bear." It's new on Bearwise's website, and so they're trying
Yeah.
to in that direction. Uh,
Because I posted that on my website about 6, 7 years ago. It's called Bear Scare. Um,
you didn't
yeah,
trademark it, did you?
I should have, but yeah, I talked about that, but that was like such it's so new that it's going to be hard for people to accept because why would you want to scare a wild animal? But you're not scaring it, you're saving it. If we could rephrase it to you're saving the bear, not scaring the bear. So
What's interesting, Daryl, too, is I've been on the Gatlinburg Trail, which is, the one of the two trails in the
Yeah,
Smokies that you can actually walk a dog.
dog. Yeah.
And and I've personally scared a bear off of the trail to get away, from these people. But then the people get mad at you
Oh,
Yeah.
because they wanted the picture. So it's a very interesting thing of like, I mean, I don't really care at that point.
I know, bring it
There's
on.
there's a guy that was mad enough that he was saying words to me, just like
Yeah.
things like that, where it is funny how you get that reaction from people too.
Yeah, and I've only had to do it like once or twice, but like just tell the people, all right, get your photos because I'm about to scare this bear away. And they might get mad, but if
Yeah.
you explain it to them,
Yeah, I think explaining it first and foremost always works well. When you're in uniform as a park ranger, it was always easy to do. But we've got some people in Cades Cove, and our followers, especially, who understand how important it is to keep bears at a distance from those developed areas. And I've been seeing it more and more, and hearing from the volunteers, and I hear it from visitors. They get mad when some guest, somebody who's trying to do the right thing scares bears off, and I'm like, man, I'm glad to hear people are out there doing that. There are people in Cades Cove who are like, get out of here, bear, when it's on the side of the road, because they're like, nothing's good is going to come of this, you being on the side of the road. And 1,000 people get mad at them and boo them and try and shame them and put them on the internet saying they ruined their vacation. But I know a lot of our followers at ABR are some of the first people to scare a bear off if they see one, and they'll call the cops if it's in someone's backyard getting in the trash. And uh, unfortunately, still in most of East Tennessee, there's nothing the cops can really do, but
not
we're working
illegal.
on that.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been harping other than the national park, Gatlinburg, sections of Gatlinburg, there's no laws against letting bears.
Townsend did, Daryl Townsend, as of this week, is
Really?
passing an ordinance. Yeah, it's a big deal. So Townsend has
Yeah,
passed an ordinance in the city limits of Townsend that businesses have to have bear-proof trash. So it's not a magic bullet, but it's a step in the right direction. The businesses, restaurants of Main Drag, Townsend city limits are all required to have bear-proof trash cans.
fantastic. Long time coming.
It's a little late coming. Yeah, I say 30 years ago when you were here, you probably would have liked that to happen, but we're moving slowly but surely.
Yeah. All right, Tori, we passed the hour mark, so
Yeah, we reached an
I got the
hour.
gift of gab, especially when Greg's
No,
here.
this is great
That's my fault.
conversation. No, thank you guys so much. I think everyone is stuck with us this whole time. So thank you everybody who's watching. And we will be back in 2 weeks, October 1st. We're doing chapters 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. Thank you so much, Daryl. Thanks, Greg and Katrina. And we'll see you then.
All right.
All right.
You
Bye,
guys talk
everybody.
soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey, Daryl, have a good trip. I sure wish I was able to go with you.
I will have lots of pictures. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in a couple weeks.